Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to tell you all about comfort food, specifically comfort food games. These are old favorites that aren't necessarily all that challenging, but are just a comfortable place to hang out and goof around. These are the games that you know all the mechanics, you know all the exploits, you know the challenges. This isn't a game for experiencing something new and interesting. This is a game for just burning some time with something that you enjoy. This is a relaxing game. Also, if you want to support the channel, there's a Ko-fi link in the description. Let me start by saying that I think that having at least one comfort food game is really important. I'm all for playing things like, Dark Souls or, trying to get the rating done on whatever your MMO happens to be. But then there always has to be this game that you come back to where it's like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm going to relax and just murder goblins today. I'm not being challenged right now, but I can just play this for hours and not have to put much thought into it. For me, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is the ultimate comfort food game. I have no idea how many times I've started over with new characters, but I do know that I'm definitely the target audience since I've purchased it over the course of the last decade on Xbox 360, PC, and Switch. And on the PC, I've bought the normal, special edition, and anniversary editions. In my defense regarding the Switch, I got that when we had our kid because he was in NICU for a month and I had very little to do but, keep him company while we were at the hospital. So yeah, I played a lot of Skyrim while my child was unconscious. For anyone who doesn't know, Skyrim is an open-world role-playing game made by Bethesda, the same studio that makes the Fallout series of games. Unlike Fallout's dystopian future setting, Skyrim has a fantasy medieval setting with humans, orcs, elves, dragons, and such, all of which you can fight or befriend using swords, bows, and magic. Mostly fight, very little befriend. Among the fans of the Elder Scrolls series, Skyrim gets very mixed reviews. On the one hand, its combat is the best in the series. Granted, that's by the standards of about a decade ago, so it hasn't aged that well, but it's still quite playable. Especially when compared to the combat of earlier games, which was, by modern standards, pretty painful to do. On the other hand, its leveling and magic systems are relatively simplistic compared to the rest of the series, opting for a relatively streamlined system with very little real freedom over the older spellcrafting systems, which, while super fun and interesting, wasn't necessarily the most accessible to people. Skyrim is really Bethesda's first attempt at being like, all right, let's bring the Elder Scrolls series to the masses, let's make this super accessible, and let's make the interface one that works equally well on PC as it does on console, and they pretty much succeeded across the board. As with all Bethesda games, it's also been the source of many a meme, most prevalent probably being that every guard apparently used to be an adventurer like you until they took an arrow to the knee. How, for some reason, you end up being in charge of every guild that you join, even if you barely know how they operate. And of course, the fact that no matter what your intentions are at the outside of the game, be that you're going to be a brilliant mage or, some fighting barbarian, you will end up playing Stealth Archer. Again. The game is massive, but relatively full of life, as when wandering around, you're never really too far away from a Falmer-infested cave, a Dwemer ruin, or a bandit camp. And that's part of why it's great. I've played thousands of hours of Skyrim across its versions at this point, and I still haven't completed every quest in the game. There's just a lot there. A lot of it isn't all that interesting, but for the most part, every nook and cranny has way more going on than would first be apparent if you just dig a little beneath the surface. This is a giant world, but it's not an empty world, which is very important. Where things get really interesting, though, is with the mods. As of scripting this video, there are 99,000 mods on Nexus Mods for just Skyrim Special Edition. And that doesn't even include total conversion mods, like the upcoming Skywind and Skyblivion projects, where they're recreating Morrowind and Oblivion entirely within the Skyrim engine. Or other projects like Enderall, which just built an entirely different game, but again using Skyrim's engine. Many of these mods are ridiculous and immersion-breaking, like replacing all the dragons with Thomas the Tank Engine or Macho Man Randy Savage, or, giving you a lightsaber. But many more enhance the experience through adding characters, items, locations, and whole quest lines, which are often better than those in the base game. So here's the part of the video where I tell you about the mods that I never play without and why. I'll, of course, link to each of them in the description. Number 1, basically everything by the mod creator unplug. They include perk system overhauls, race overhauls, an actual religion system, a couple combat overhauls, since, again, Skyrim's combat it's the best that it's ever been in the series, but still hasn't aged all that well. There's also Standing Stone and magic overhauls, along with reworks of the werewolf and vampire systems. Basically, if you want a really good foundational set of mods that will help fix or just flesh out your experience, unplug is your go-to. What I like about their mods is that a lot of the time, they're just adding extra depth to existing mechanics, as is the case in the Wintersun Religion mod and Thunderchild Shout mod. Religion in Skyrim is something that people talk about all the time. Oh yes, those nasty, those horrible Talos worshippers, how dare they? Here's a shrine, and if you pray at it, then you get a small buff and it cures your diseases. Instead of that, you instead can become an actual follower of a specific god, and by doing the things that they like, you get increasingly good bonuses. And those bonuses increase in power the more that you do things that your god likes, and eventually sometimes even unlocking new powers. With Thunderchild, the change is basically just that the different combinations of words mean different things. So in the context of shouts, one of the powers that you can get in the game where basically you're using dragon language and channeling your Thuum, and you're saying words in a phrase that amount to, I'm going to use unrelenting force. I say 3 dragon words and I send out a big old wall of force thing in front of me. Or I say the words associated with fire and I shoot some fire in front of me. The thing is that words are not that limited, so this adds the ability that you can now meditate on the meanings of words that you already have, and then unlock new combinations and shouts based on what you already have. So it just adds a ton more depth to that in a totally intuitive way. Yeah, unplug is just awesome. Number 2, the Serana Dialogue add-on by Martimus. If you played Skyrim, you're well aware of the fact that Serana is awesome, partially because most other companions in the game are pretty two-dimensional. The Serana Dialogue add-on basically just improves everyone's favorite base game follower by adding a ton more lines for her to say, including additional interactions that you can have with her. She'll have much more to say about particular quest lines, even modded quest lines a lot of the time, more to say about her inner struggles with the fact that you're having to go against her father, and it even opens up the options to romance her if you're into that kind of thing and want to marry Serana. She's like the only, she's the most interesting companion in the game, and default you cannot marry her, but you can marry, some lady that runs a tavern. Number 3, Sky Shards by Dead Mono. Sky Shards are actually a part of Elder Scrolls Online and basically just attach real rewards to exploration. This mod adds them to Skyrim. In short, scattered across the world, there are now these crystal formations to find, and if you find enough of them, you get additional perk points. You can configure how many you get per Sky Shard. Especially if you're using a perk overhaul that adds additional perks to your skill trees, it's pretty easy to come up short on perks way too easily. And I love that Sky Shards helps fix this problem while making me actually explore the gigantic world of Skyrim and see things that I wouldn't necessarily see in a given playthrough. It's also just a lot more balanced way of getting additional perk points. There's a lot of other ways that you can get them through mods. You can get like double perk points per level. You can convert Dragon Souls into perk points. The problem is, especially the Dragon Souls to perk points thing, it's configurable, but dragons are an infinite resource in this game, so you can end up with infinite perk points, and that's just kind of silly. Your power scaling is gated behind the number of perk points that you have in a lot of ways. So having access to more of them is one thing. Having access to all of them is something completely different. Number 4, map marker mods. There's a few of these to be had, so just find your favorite, but in any case, there's a few quests that are just incredibly frustrating to do without a map. The most notable are, at least to me, the Crimson Nirnroot quest, where you have to wander around Blackreach underground. You cannot mount up without special mounts, all that kind of stuff. And you're getting shot up by Falmer and potentially attacked by Dwemer automatons and all this kind of stuff. And you're trying to hear the singing sounds of Nirnroot, because there's this Crimson Nirnroot and you need to collect like 30 of them. Yeah, all this quest does is just adds quest markers to all of them so you can find them easily. The rewards for the quest are pretty good, but even with the quest reward being pretty good, it's just not worth it a lot of the time. This makes it a lot less painful. There's also quest markers for the Stones of Baron Zaya, which are scattered in the most random locations across the world, and unless you're a very thorough completionist, you're unlikely to actually find them all. Plus, some are hidden in locations that are either difficult or impossible to visit more than once, so the map markers help you avoid locking yourself out of finishing the collection quest. Finally, there's map markers for all of Dawnguard. They're just a must for me. There's 2 zones in particular that by default have no map markers, and no map really at all. I mean, you get your local map and that's it. And these zones are pretty dang hard to navigate as a consequence. The Soul Cairn and the Vale are both this way. The Soul Cairn in particular, everything looks the same. And it's like, okay, here's a collection quest and another collection quest. And you're supposed to meet up with these people. And you're supposed to track down these enemies that are all spread out. By the way, everything looks the same. Yeah, the Soul Cairn kind of sucks in that way. The Vale isn't as bad because at least things look a little different. But it's also got giant cliffs and canyons in your way, so it's like, oh, I just need to go right over there. Oh, there's a wall. Yeah, both of these areas have plenty of stuff to discover and find, and it's really, really cool to be able to find all of it, but without a map, it's just like, get me out of here as soon as possible, and you end up missing out on some really cool content. So yeah, adding maps to both of those are just necessary in my book. Number 5, finally, the pièce de résistance, the king of all mods, at least in my opinion, Legacy of the Dragonborn. This is a mod that really belongs in any RPG, at least the ones that have you collecting stuff. I would love to see it added as official content to online RPGs as well. What Legacy of the Dragonborn does is it adds a museum to the game, with a place for every single unique item in the game, while also creating specific displays for when you completed certain quest lines. Did you defeat Alduin and save the world? Have a display. It's a giant dragon. It's pretty cool. Have you collected all the 3 Elder Scrolls in the game? We've got a place for you to display them. And since they're pretty dang heavy and they're quest items, so you can't normally get rid of them, here's a place that you won't actually get rid of them, but you're also not having to carry around 30 pounds of scroll. Are you all done using that ebony dragon claw? Okay, we got a place to show that off too. Oh, how about if you've killed a mammoth and you collected his tusks and trunk? Well, now you can go down to the Natural History Gallery and make a mammoth display. It even has integration for a ton of mods, so at the very least there's a ton of space for, anniversary edition stuff, including an aquarium for all the fish you can now catch, and a couple places for things like the Saints and Seducers mod, things like that. But it doesn't stop there. The mod also adds a bunch of additional unique items that you can either use or display, and has various quests and events that trigger as time passes. It's got its own storyline and basically quest line attached to it. There's even a whole guild of explorers, and you can go on expeditions with them and explore brand new ruins that actually involve puzzles that are actually difficult. It's super cool. In addition, there's also the Safe House, a player home with all the amenities, so it's got an enchanting table, an alchemy table, a bed, all that kind of stuff, and even has patches that you can add on to add guest rooms for multiple modded followers. So if you have Inigo, who's a very popular follower, there's a patch to add a specific room that's tailored to him. But the really cool part about the Safe House is the material storage and craft loot systems. Inside the museum and inside your safe house, there is a chest that if you interact with it, you don't open the chest. Instead, it just stores all of your materials. It gets all of them out of your inventory and sorts them into appropriate containers. So if you're carrying a bunch of iron ore, they're now in a container. You're carrying leather, hides, gems, all of that kind of stuff, it's now in containers. And you can even configure, it'll take soul gems out of my inventory. Well, that's kind of annoying. Let me disable that. I want to hang on to my soul gems. Then there's the craft loot system. which is where when you interact with a crafting station and you have the craft loot system enabled, you can disable it. It proceeds to take everything associated with that profession and fill your inventory with it real quick, so then you can use it. And then when you're done crafting, it pulls it all back out again. So you don't have to go weeding through a bunch of boxes to find out where the heck did I put that thing. It just does it for you. Now, I get that this is kind of immersion breaking, but there's also just a lot of materials in the game, especially you get into the alchemy ingredients, and there are hundreds of alchemy ingredients. So this just saves so many headaches. And the fact is that, yes, I can go through and individually deposit every single alchemy ingredient that I own, or I can just have the system do it, and it takes 2 seconds, and I would much rather do that and continue, killing Falmer. It also just makes inventory management and your weight limit a lot easier to manage when you don't have, 800 alchemy ingredients weighing you down that together weigh 600 pounds. Yeah, now they're all in a box for you. It's awesome. Everybody who plays Skyrim and is willing to mod should absolutely pick this up. Sorry if you're on console, not available there. And that's my list of mods that I always use for every Skyrim playthrough. There's technically more than 5 mods here, but, you mix and match as you choose. I would, however, like to talk a little bit more about the last mod, Legacy of the Dragonborn, and if you're a longtime viewer, you've probably even heard me talk about this before, but it bears repeating. Every game with a ton of collectibles and unique items needs to have their own version of the Dragonborn gallery. Give gamers something tangible and visual that they can see and be reminded of everything that they've accomplished in your game. I've played plenty of RPGs over the years, and I can't tell you how many times that I've gotten a really cool, unique weapon that was a lot of effort to get. And, it's the uber mega battle axe of Gandalf or whatever it happens to be. Doesn't matter. And it's got a really, really cool model in game, and it's got all these effects, except it's a two-handed weapon, and I'm going sword and board, so I will never use it, and it's going to spend the rest of its life in a box somewhere in my house. How incredibly lame is that? MMORPGs in particular should do exactly this, but put a particular emphasis on guilds. Give us a guild hall where there are special displays to commemorate content that the guild has completed, especially if we completed it together. Did your guild group up, fight their way through the Icecrown Citadel and defeat Arthas? Congrats! In addition to your loot, your guild house now has an epic painting of the fight, or better yet, a full 3D model of Arthas battling a group of adventurers while a frostworm circles overhead and Valkyr assists their master. How friggin' cool would that be? People like to be reminded of their accomplishments, and an achievement notification and a checkbox buried 6 layers deep in a menu just aren't that exciting. I absolutely credit Legacy of the Dragonborn with helping to keep me invested in Skyrim. Because of it, I have spent so many hours trying to track down some esoteric items I don't actually care about simply because they'll look great on my wall. And because of that, I've gotten plenty of experience to see, great quests and locations I would have otherwise ignored. Personally, I enjoy a warrior sword and board playstyle, and I hate doing theft missions. So I'm generally not interested in doing Thieves Guild type stuff. But there's a whole wing of the museum dedicated to stuff that you've stolen. So now I've got to fill up those displays, and gosh darn it, now I've gone and done something challenging and had a good time. Okay, I'm going to stop gushing about how amazing Legacy of the Dragonborn is now. That's my list of go-to mods for my comfort food game, but what about all of you? What is your comfort food game? Do you also have way too many hours in Skyrim? And if so, what mods can you not do without? Let me know in the comments below. Again, I have a coffee link in the description if you want to support the channel. And until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.